Good morning, anybody who's here. Excuse me. We just get the Spotify playlist this morning. I just realized I can probably stream music and not have it up, but awesome. Alright, we'll let that one go. Out of curiosity, is anybody here yet? Just got here. Hello. I was just letting my Spotify playlist go while I was waiting for people to show up, so I decided I probably shouldn't be recording that part for YouTube. Whether it's monetized or not, I don't feel like getting a copyright strike auto-logged against me for class material. All right. How's your Unity project going? Since I think you're one of the maybe only people in the room right now. It's pretty good and fun. That's good. I don't know. Something about Unity's just been starting to click, at least for me this semester, so I'm glad it's kind of popping for you. I'm actually picking up some new things that I didn't even realize as we go along here. I'll show off my little project that I've been playing with before. before I go into the lab, but learning some interesting things about exporting to WebGL and memory management and all that fun stuff. But let's step off camera here for a second, pop the window open. It's beautiful out today. All right, well, hey, we got some more people in here. Good morning, everybody. Um, so today, if you're looking at the Moodle page, we're going to do a fairly straightforward lab in Unity. So basically, we're going to combine some of the things that we've done before. If you are very familiar with Unity, this will probably take you 15 minutes. If you are new to Unity, it's going to take you a little bit longer just to figure out where to click and what you have to do. I'm going to be going through this really quickly. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask along the way. But basically, I'm just going to run through the lab to show you what would be going on. Before we get into that, though, I kind of want to show you this thing that I've been playing with. So this is this dungeon generation algorithm I've been kind of looking at. So basically, we have a ball on a plane. I've thrown some textures down, so the ball has this nice little free asset. Floor just has one of the albedo textures, so it's this kind of checkerboardy thing. Haven't really done much other than color them or texture them. But this is basically the ball roller. I think I mentioned before I just grabbed a random dungeon generation algorithm. Luckily, it's already in C# too, so it's pretty easy to port. But I've started adding things to this, which is kind of cool, at least I think. So we have our ball, have a nice little level indicator, and the ball rolls around our procedurally generated dungeon. And oh, what is this? It's an exit. Neat, we're on level 2. So basically what this is, it's a very poorly optimized environment. Um, basically, it's just a list of 2D maps, 2D array maps with ones and zeros stored in it. Could be a lot more intelligent, honestly. That's up there. Yeah, it's kind of a very simple rogue, real-time roguelite-ish type of thing. So things that I'm kind of learning here, at least about memory management, because I don't really, and oh, this is not even good because there that one's locked away. So I hit the P key and I can cheat and move ahead to the next levels. So I kind of loop through all the different levels I have. And here we are. We've managed to kind of clip outside of where we need to be, and now we're on top. Let's just stop right here. There we go. So some things I'm learning. So if you are going to go into Unity and export to WebGL, you kind of run into memory issues with browser memory, heap space, and all that kind of fun stuff. I am very unintelligently creating these scenes, so I'm instantiating and destroying all of these blocks every time a level is basically switched to. Smarter would be to create a single pool of these objects and just have them be active and moved around as I need. But kind of a fun little foray into some of the generation algorithms. I actually put this up on my website at that, I think it's like the Dungeon Roller um, link that I've sent before. But it's just kind of fun to dink around with, honestly. I'm probably going to keep playing with it in terms of like adding enemies, maybe adding some terrain deformations. So it's kind of cool. Having more fun with this than that Arkanoid thing that I was building in WebGL. So yeah, that's what I've been playing with. So this is my term project. I switch topics. It's allowed. But if I make any decent progress, I'll probably share the script files and all that later on. It's not in a very pretty state yet, but that's kind of what I've been playing with. So other than that, we'll do this little Unity roller. So the whole point of this one, I do have a little caveat. See if you're following the slide. Sorry, it's a professor thing. That's my little thing to make sure you guys are kind of paying attention, being asynchronous and offline, and me talking to a camera rather than actually looking you directly makes this a little bit trickier. but I want to make sure everybody's following along. So some of these points, I give you the code. Some of them, I kind of give you vague instructions. Some of them, I tell you to look at the slides, even pointing to particular page numbers in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some terrain, not just a straight up plane. So if you guys remember doing the terrain before where we added like the palm trees and added the 3D character and all that. Um, and we're just going to combine it with the ball roller. So we're basically mushing together two separate concepts. So almost like a simple tech demo. So yeah, some terrain. We're going to texture it. Texturing is something we didn't really talk about for terrain. It's a little bit different than just dragging and dropping onto, say, a ball or a cube or something like that. Um, fix the lighting, fix the camera, add collectibles, and then a little bit of homework. So honestly, this shouldn't take you all that long. Um, and again, feel free to stop me as we go. I'm going to go ahead and drag this. Actually, I'll leave this over here, I think maybe. So what I've done so far is I created a blank Unity project, 3D, obviously. And one thing I should mention too, because I ran into this yesterday. I don't know what happened, but somehow in between exporting my project to WebGL, I closed it because it crashed. I reopened it. I think I saved it, and then I closed it again. I managed to delete a scene with everything that I'd set up in there, and that scene was just gone. Like I think I was using the default scene without saving it as a object or anything like that. So make sure that you always have your scene saved and available. Like here, you get a default project, there's the sample scene, you see it in the scenes area. Um, make sure that you can always go back to this because recreating it's not a pain, but if you have a more complicated project, it would probably irk you a little bit if you don't have this like backup. So anyway, first things first, what do we have to do? So we're going to add some terrain. So let's add the terrain. We're going to adjust its settings, and then we're going to add some definition. So let's add some hills, maybe some valleys, something of that nature. So game object, 3D object, terrain. We're going to get, oh, we're kind of in an odd view here. So let's frame it. Let's not frame it. Oh, we're just, oh, I'm in game mode. That's why. Okay, that's better. Keep forgetting I'm in game mode sometimes. All right, so we see it's kind of, it's not centered, but it's kind of locked to the origin here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to zoom out a bit. We see that this thing is absolutely massive by default. Our transform is already set to the origin, otherwise we would click the three dots and then reset and just bring it back here. With terrain, you don't just scale it, you can actually set its width and height. So it's width and length, basically. So I click the little settings icon in terrain, and I have a lot more options here. So I'm going to set this to 100 and 100. It's a lot smaller now, a little bit more manageable for what we're going to be doing. And again, it's a terrain object. It's not just a straight up plane. So we have a lot more things going on here. All right, so now we're going to deform it a little bit. So we're going to click this paintbrush. I'm going to make the brush size a lot smaller. Let's make it 1. And I want to, oops, what I did was I just painted a hole because I had that set from before. So this little drop down here, you actually have some options of what you can do. So before it was raise and lower terrain by default. So you kind of can draw these little pointies. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger of a brush. Oh, it's 0.1. That's why it's so weird looking. 1.0. All right. Actually, let's make it a little bit bigger. 5.0. So we can just kind of add some features here. We're getting a little bit high in terms of the mountain space. Sure, let's make it crazy. All right, I have some terrain features here. We have a nice little mountain range. I don't have a plan for what I want this to look like. I'm just kind of free drawing. Not necessarily what I was thinking I was going to say, but just draw some stuff. doesn't really matter too much. Um, so yeah, we'll do that. And so we have some mountains here. I'm gonna make sure my scene is saved. And then we have our terrain. Pretty straightforward. I've looked at several terrain related videos, tutorials. The Unity editor is okay. If you want a decent looking terrain, it's usually kind of recommended to use a different tool or grab a texture mesh or something like that and apply it to the terrain rather than kind of go through and draw it yourself. Just, personal preference. I think for what we're doing here, it's fine. Um, but more or less, it's not a perfect terrain. So we have some mountains. Again, we did that before in class. Ooh, what do we have here? UMMORPG. Looks like you have an MMO based asset. Kind of curious. Not related to that. All right, $80, and what do you get? Looks like it's a MMO engine. Cool. There you go. So $80, you can make your own MMO. What I want is a terrain texture, so I'm going to go ahead and search for that. All right. And I'm going to click free because, again, I'm not paying for anything for this. So we have some terrain textures here. Again, you see like here, there's height map terrain textures. That would be where, you know, you already have an environment modeled with the ridges and the valleys and all that fun stuff. I have this one already downloaded, but basically here you got grass, soil, all of these different terrains. So I'm going to go ahead and import it since it's not in my project yet. Take a hot minute to decompress. And then we have all of these assets here. I don't want the demo scene because I don't want to import this asset. One thing I should mention, as far as I'm aware with Unity, when you go to like build a project, all of the assets are going to be written out as a compressed file. I think even if it's not being used, somebody might correct me on that if I'm wrong, but usually you don't want to import everything. Kind of like any project, basically, you don't want to import every single object in your project just to avoid ballooning it up. I will check on that to make sure that I'm right there, but I'm fairly certain it's all like this assets directory is all kind of written out. It's a file. All right, so this is importing very slowly. You can't click anything while we're waiting. Guess I really only needed one one texture, but okay. Here we go. So we have this terrain textures. So we have some various maps, like we have UV maps, we have the actual texture itself. So I can basically pick whichever of these that I really want here. All right, so I've got my scene, I've got my terrain. And what we're gonna do here is we're gonna add this texture. So I mentioned that texturing's a little bit, adding material or texture is a little bit different for terrain. Like let's say I want this to be grass, I can't just drag and drop. Doesn't work. What you have to do is you have to go into your terrain settings, and again, this would be um, in the paintbrush, right? Paint texture. Yeah. Okay, so paintbrush, paint texture, and then you'd paint the selected layer. You have some control over this if you want. I'm going to go ahead and click Edit Terrain Layers and add a layer. And then I should be able to pick, oh, create layer, sorry. Not add layer. I've got to create a layer first. So I'm going to add this grass. I'm going to double click it. And then everything's grassy. I could add layers for the mountains. We're just going to leave everything as kind of a mossy look. But, if you wanted to go hog wild, you could definitely texture everything to look a little bit prettier. We could also smooth out these mountain ranges too if we wanted. Maybe we can kind of smooth this off a little bit. So I just click smooth height and I'm just kind of holding my mouse and clicking it. You can see it smoothing a little bit. But again, for the purpose of this, I don't necessarily care if it's pretty or not. I just want terrain. So let's call it fixing it in the next release. We want this is 0.001. Okay, so we have our terrain. Pretty straightforward, right? It is a terrain object. We have scaled it. We've added some texture. And now let's add some walls. So this is dipping into that ball roller. So we're gonna add some walls here. Okay, so what we want is we're gonna create a empty game object. So game object, create empty. I could have right-clicked and done that there too. I'm gonna call this walls. And now I'm also going to add a cube. And I'm gonna frame it on my cube. So my cube is very low. It's basically taking the last transform that I used, so I'm kind of way down here. So I'm gonna reset. Now it's to the origin, but you'll notice that, again, it is exactly centered. And again, this terrain is parented at the corner. So I'm going to be a little bit lazy here. And I'm going to, well, first I'm going to move this cube up by 0.5. So we want it up. So now when we look at it, say from the side, we see that it's basically perfectly aligned here. I'm just going to stretch it out to the size of this terrain, and I'm going to kind of see where it is approximately. I could math this out a little bit, but we are not necessarily going to. Actually, we could. So this is, how did I make this? 100 by 100, I think. Yeah, 100 by 100. So we'll make this cube 100 units wide. So let's say 100 in the x direction. Oops, we don't want walls, we want our cube. 100 in the x direction. All right, so this is now needing to slide down in x by, I think, 50. Yeah. So what I did here, again, this is my origin. I made this the length of the terrain, and it has to slide down by 50 because it's going basically 100 in both directions, so we just want to slide it down. So when we zoom in here, we are perfectly aligned on the edge, and life is pretty good there. Again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to bother me as I'm doing this. This is, again, just kind of a live demo of the project here. So we have our cube, so we'll call this, I don't even know what direction we're facing now, wall 1. I'm going to duplicate it with Control D. Let's rename this guy to be wall 2. And we want to offset it in the Z direction by 100. Okay, so now it's on the other side. Again, I'm just following along with what we did before. And we have some features here, which is going to be kind of an interesting look later on when we actually get this running. Our mountains are kind of clipping into our wall here. We're going to leave it as is. I'm just kind of curious what the objects are going to do in this case. All right, so we have two walls. Let's go ahead and zoom out a bit more. Again, we have a massive play area here. So if you export this to WebGL, expect maybe some performance hits the more stuff you add. All right, so we're gonna go wall 3. And again, so we're gonna pop this to the 0 and the Z, the 0 and the X. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to flip this around by making the Z 100 wide, and I'm gonna make the X 1 in terms of scale. And then I wanna slide the X down by, oops, wrong way. I want the Z to be 50, I think. Yeah. So just basically I'm playing with position and scale. That's all I'm doing here. The intent is just to have these basically be perfectly aligned, right? Nothing crazy here. So then we're going to duplicate wall 3, rename wall 4, wall 5. I don't have 5 walls. 4-walled object. And this is in the, I think, negative 50. Oops. That was wrong because X has to be in 100. So again, this is different than the slides. We don't ever have everything perfectly center aligned where it's just the negative. This is 0, so you have to offset it by 100 to make it fit. All right, so now we have an enclosed space. I'm going to put these walls inside my empty container here just so I can manage them. If I wanted later, I could kind of do that. I can also hide them. I don't need them taking up my scene. All right, so we saved. We have walls. Life is good. I'm going to skip over the terrain features because maybe we'll add a few things. just for fun here. So we can add trees. Yeah, maybe we'll add a tree. So I click trees, add tree. I don't have a tree, so this is actually kind of interesting. What we can do here doesn't have to necessarily be a straight up tree. Well, I could add a tree. Hmm. Let's make this kind of interesting-ish. So I added a capsule. Capsule is at the origin here. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it into a prefab. So I'm gonna add a prefabs folder. I drag my capsule in here. I get rid of it on the scene. So I have this capsule, however you want to call it. Oh, let's be cheeky with it. Let's give it a texture here. So there, we got a nice little pillar. Let's move it up by 0.5. Scale it in the Y direction by 5. So this would be what, 2.5? Something like that. So a weird obelisk-y type thing. So now we're going to go back to our scene. We have this, we have this. Click our terrain, edit our trees. I'm going to add a tree. I'm going to add this capsule prefab. Oh, let's have it bend by 5. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just clicking random things. Now what I can do is I can paint on my trees. So let's see, brush size, maybe make our density a little bit smaller. So, oh, it's it's instantiated a ton. It's just literally clipping out as we go. See how bad this kills my performance. Oh, and I actually have them kind of underneath too, so that's not necessarily good. But it's fine for now. We have some terrain. Point is, you don't necessarily have to have a tree object. Any game object can be treated as a tree. Like if you want to mass place them, for instance. Maybe what I have to do is go from the top or something like that. So, all right, so we have that. If I was turning this in for points, I would screenshot it and paste it into Q1, and then we have our environment. All right, so yeah, we have our space here. Now we're going to add our player. So again, if you've been following along, we've probably done this a couple times already. I like this because you get a nice feel for how physics forces kind of get exerted. So let's, origin's going to be over here again. So I'm going to add a sphere. We're going to call this guy the player. He's over here. Let's reset him to origin. Bump him up by 0.5 so he's sitting on top. And I'm also going to move his X transform a little bit. So let's put him at, say, 5, 5. So 5 in the X, 5 in the Z. So bringing it down in X, over in Z. And if we frame over here, I'm actually stuck among my little pillars. I don't know that it's going to be able to get out. Oh, I probably drew way too many trees on here. This is going to be horrible. Maybe we can figure a way out of it. So if you're looking at this, I made the density way too dense for these things. But we'll see what happens. Okay, so then what do we need? We need a controller, we need a rigid body, and we need speed. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to create our scripts folder. Oops, what did I do? Didn't want that. Create folder scripts. And in here, we're going to create C# script. This is player controller. I have a little warning here that we must use the correct shader. Otherwise, lighting won't work correctly. So maybe we can go ahead and change that in our prefab. So let's see, our prefabs, capsule, we need nature soft occlusion shader. So our shader is standard. Click, please. Nature, soft occlusion. Okay, so that should be good, I would think. Save. That's hopefully going to go away. Maybe that'll diffuse our lighting a little bit better. Okay, so we have our sphere. We need to add a rigid body, and we need to add a speed variable. So our cue or our player sphere here, we need a component, rigid body. Again, it's a physics-based object, so we want it to act as one. So we have that. And then we are also going to need, and I'm going to pop over to my slides here on the other screen that you can't see. Basically, this is just the Unity scripting slides. I just want to make sure I get everything I need in here. All right, so we need our rigid body. So private rigid body RB. So again, it's going to be private to this class, and we want a public float speed variable. We'll set the speed variable in Unity. And in our start function, we want RB to be get component rigid body. It's been so long since I've done C#, so I want to make sure I don't screw this syntax up. And then, so we have our reference here. We're going to add the fixed update function. So void fixed update. Again, this is for physics-based updates. We want the horizontal and the vertical axes, which are just the arrow keys. We're going to apply those forces. So float move horiz equals input dot get axis horizontal. And then we'll just copy this, move in the vertical direction, vertical. Okay, so we have our forces. We're going to create a vector 3. So our vec3 movement equals new vector 3. Move horiz. We want 0 in the y, and we want our z direction. And we're going to apply this force to a rigid body. So rb.add force movement times speed. Right? So this is our arrow keys, and we're going to apply a speed to it. All right. And that is that for the ball so far. We're going to add the trigger in a little bit. Okay, so it's going to go ahead and compile. I'm not watching. Okay, chat looks good. The rigid body is good. We now have to add our script to the player. And then we're going to set our speed to 10. Set it to whatever you like. Obviously, the higher the speed, the quicker the ball's going to go. And before we go ahead and do everything else, I'm going to move the camera a bit because right now it's kind of wonky. So let's I want you up higher, so let's put you at about 20. And I want Z to be about 50. No, I want Z at positive 50, thank you. X at positive 50. And then we're going to rotate in the X direction by 45. Sure. Let's bump up the Y as well. Maybe I'll do 90. So we get a nice little top-down view. And then Y will go up even higher. So right now we're just way up high. Looking at the camera preview to play with the camera a bit. All right, so I have this lovely mass of capsules. It almost looks like a construction worker spilled out a bunch of things. Oh, I can't even. We're clipping out too. So let's zoom the camera. Actually, let's just fix the camera to the ball. So for the camera, we want to add a script, right? So our camera, we're gonna need a camera controller. Okay, so we have our camera script. We want a reference to our game object or our player game object. Player. We also want an offset. So basically, we're just going to, again, do this calculation so that we can have the camera follow our ball. Transform.position references the camera itself. And then we want to reference the player position. And then every time we call late update, which is again after everything else is done, we want to update this position equals player.transform.position plus offset. And I think that's all we need in here. So this script is good. It's going to compile. I'm going to add the script to the camera. And then we are going to add the player to the camera script. It is possible to reference other objects directly in C#. You can do like a find object or get object type of call, but this is a much easier way, at least in my opinion. And then we're gonna have to zoom the camera, and I forgot about too, because it's way too high up. So let's move the camera down. Oh, let's say, what did I have in the slides? Let me look here maybe, because this is a little bit more sane. Let's say so 0, 10, -10. So what are we looking at here? And then X is going to be 45. So I'm just looking at the slides to see what the camera position was. Oh, and it looks like I've got some, should have made the borders a little bit bigger. But looks like I'm trapped by some trees here, kind of. Nice little Marble Madness type game going on here. Wonder if I can remove some of these trees. Terrain. Let's do this. Let's get rid of our trees for now. So I just clicked edit trees and then remove trees. I don't necessarily want them blocking everything. But with this terrain, again, we get our nice physics properties. Add some trees a little bit more intelligently, obviously, if you want it to be a Far Cry 1 type of thing. Ooh, we get a nice little cup holder here for a ball. Beautiful. Okay, so we have our camera, we have our terrain, and we have our player. We also fixed the camera in there. I think I just mentioned that, so that's good. We can also fix the lighting if we want. So let's click our light. The light's kind of like this, so maybe we can play around with the light a little bit. Just want to make sure that I'm kind of following along with, again, the slides-ish, because that's what you guys are going to be looking at. I'm just going to be dinking around with it. I mean, it's more or less okay. I could change the light color if I wanted to make it a kind of interesting. Let's go teal. Nice teal light. And we can play with the intensity, so let's really lighten things up. And let's go ahead and move it up a bit, maybe rotate it. So again, playing with lighting, it's going to really interact with everything. Here, everything looks kind of washed out, which, because I turned the intensity up, we kind of expect that. Maybe we'll change the light back to something else. Point light? No, we don't want a point light. Or a spotlight. I think directional is what we actually want. Let's put the intensity back down to 1. I really don't like this color. So there we go. Everything's going to be doom colored. Drenched in red. Perfect. Doom. 2. Hell on earth. Nobody's going to be able to see this. We can change this to runtime. I got a nice sludgy look, so there you go. Just go back to white. All right, we'll do this. Enough thinking around here. Okay, so lighting's changed. Camera, I already did this part. And now we're gonna place some collectibles. So here again, we're gonna be creating prefabs. So I'm going to make a Marble Madness was a great game. I remember playing that on my Apple IIe or 2GS, I think I had it on back in the day. I was horrible at it. So we're gonna add a cube. We're going to get it set to whatever we want it to look like, and then we're going to turn it into a prefab. So first things first, let's go ahead and add our cube. I'm just thinking of what we want to do here. Let's do a capsule, just for fun. So we're gonna call this pickup. Peek up, peek top. Pickup. All right, and we're going to reset it. We're going to move it up by 0.5, and I'm going to move it in the X direction just so I can see it. Frame to it. Since it's a capsule, it's a little bit longer than the average object. So I'm going to up its Y value again a little bit. Oh, Game Boy had to be rough for Marble Madness. All right, so we have this guy here. Actually, let's move it up a little bit more, 1.2, get it off the ground, because it's going to rotate. All right, so what else did we have to do here? I'm gonna leave the scale as is. I'm gonna rotate it by 45 just to make it look a wee bit different than everything else. So you have this kind of pill-looking object here. You move it down to 1.1. And then we're going to texture it a bit. So let's see if there's any other interesting textures. To see what's out there for fun. There's going to be a million thing with the 376 textures. Oh, what can we get? Ooh, lava texture. That could be fun. Stylized stone. Just dinking around in the asset store is fun in and of itself, I think. Let's go with lava. That sounds like fun. Okay, so I don't want the scene. I'll just import. I will import everything. This will take a second. Not even a second. Even better. What we should probably do too is we should make a nice folder for our materials. And then I'm going to go ahead and drag these into my materials folder. Just to keep everything nice and set. So lava, materials. And again, I'm going to be texturing my guy here. So this is lava. The cube or the capsules are lava. This would be a good texture for a thing that you don't want to touch, actually. We could probably animate the texture too. If we created an animator and had it kind of like swirl around, that might be an interesting thing to do. Outside the scope of this, though. And then last but not least here, we need a script for a collectible. So I'll just call it collectible controller. Could have just called it collectible. And then we're going to transform it. Oh, we also should add its collider here too, I suppose. So we slide this over here for a moment. Collectible controller. So on our update function, we want to rotate it. So transform.rotate new vector 3, 15, 30, 45 times time dot delta time. And again, we're just going to go ahead and you can play with these values as you want. It's just going to be what direction it spins, basically, or how much it spins. Oops. Save as a different keystroke. All right, so we have our capsule here. Let's just go ahead and watch it spin to make sure everything looks good before we prefab it out. Nothing is happening. I forgot to add it to my pickup. There we go. Save, play. All right, a nice slow rotation. Um, if you're thinking of this in terms of game design or even animation, this is calling out the object. It's more visible to the person playing the game rather than kind of a hidden thing that's just not moving at all. You know, if you want them to have their attention called out to it. All right, so next we want our onTrigger enter function. Oh no, this is onTrigger enter goes into the player. So we're done with collectible controller. So go ahead and close that. This now needs to become a prefab. So I'm happy with it the way it is now. So I'm going to drag it into prefabs. We see its color change. I'm going to delete it. Well, no, I'm not going to delete it from the scene. Actually, before we turn it into a prefab, we do have to edit it a little bit. So it is a triggered object. It needs a rigid body. So again, I double clicked it. I am now inside the prefab itself. You see the background's turned blue. I'm editing it. I want it to be kinematic. So trigger, allows that onTrigger enter function to work, is kinematic, optimizes the animation for Unity. It tells it not to necessarily cache it, basically. All right, so this is set. Every object of that will now be set. I guess while we're in there, we should actually add a tag because this is going to be a pickup. So I clicked add tag plus pick up. And then we're going to tag this thing. All right, so now we're back in our scene. We have our pickup. And what else are we going to do here? I think that's about it. So now we're going to duplicate this thing. So we'll look at it from the top view. We want our hands. Oops, no, we want to move it. So now I have some pickups here. Duplicate it again, duplicate again, duplicate again. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 objects, right? They're all rotating. Again, you could perturb that rotation a bit if you wanted to make them rotate differently or the same, depends on what your preference is. So we have that. And now what we want to do in our player function, I think this is in player. I think I actually have the code wrong in the guide. So looking at this now, I ran through this last night. I thought it was fine, but this onTrigger enter, I'm pretty sure we want this in the player and not on the prefab. So if you're reading this and playing along, that should be on the player. Because onTrigger enter collider other. So we're basically going to be seeing if the thing that we're bumping into is a pickup and we're going to set it to false. So this is in here, other dot, oh, oops, wrong screen. We want to check to make sure this is a pickup. So if other dot game object dot compare tag pick up. Yes, that's exactly where I wanted those to go. Come on, Vim, work with me here. All right, so other.game object.set active false. 1 second. Sorry, I'm just seeing random people walk through my backyard. Kind of weird from up here. All right, so we have our object here. Okay, so I think that's all we need here. So let's go ahead and let this compile. All good. If we click all of our objects, we see their pickups. We see they have the is kinematic set. They are is triggered. So this should be all right. And when we bump into them now, they should disappear. Yep. Okay, so that's good. All with me so far, hopefully. So the thing I was kind of talking about, if you're in this part in the lab manual where you're adding the collectibles, the prefabs, make a script, attach and add the collision test. This should be on the player object. So I will make a quick note. I'm just going to update it in Moodle. I'm not going to update the lab manual. So I'll put a note in Moodle directly. I just don't want you guys to follow through the lab later on if you're not doing it and then wonder why it's not working. My bad. Okay. Display and description page. Save. If you do screw it up, you'll probably notice right away that it's not working. Actually, what might happen is the player would probably disappear, if anything. So we don't necessarily want that. All right, so we have our collecting going on, and then the last step is to add our win condition. So basically, we're going to check if the number, if our score is basically 6 or higher. We can add the score variable. And if you get this done super early and you want to add something, find a particle effect, do something when you win, add an audio file. It's not required. I'm not going to say, okay, what happens when you win? I do want to see a score, so I'll do this momentarily. But this is more if you want to dig into Unity a little bit more and you guys have the time. But I'm not going to require it. All right, so let's round this out then. One thing we can do, this is kind of fun, so let's bump up the player speed to 30. Go ahead and play. So now I'm a lot faster and we can get some real speed and fly off the map. Can I see if I... Nope. All right. So if you do want to deform the terrain, make sure that you have a way to bound the player inside of it. Otherwise, they're going to go flying. Okay, so we need a score, and we need a score variable. So what we'll do in the player script, let's add a public score. So public int score. So this is something that we've done before. We'll initialize it to 0. And then we're also going to need a reference to the text. So public text, score text. And then what we're going to want is a reference to that. So score text equals, what's the call for that? This one's in the slides. I didn't add it. Just checking. So okay, I don't have to pull it in. Just public text is all I need. And then, so we have our player script. This didn't update, cannot be, oh, okay. Couple of things here. Now I'm going off script. So we need using Unity engine.ui. So we don't have a reference to this text variable until we pull that in. So this should update. I saw a little error down here at the bottom. All right, so now our player script has a reference to a text element. So what we have to do is game object, UI, text, get our canvas, our text, our event system. I am going to set the text to be null. What font can we use? Do we have options here? Text, font. I have to import something then. I don't feel like importing another font, so I'll make this 24. I don't know if it'll let me do that or not. We will make it, let's make it green, bright green, so we'll be able to see it. And we want to position it, we'll do it in the top left again. Again, I'm holding Shift, I'm holding Alt, and then I'm clicking this. Okay. And then we're going to give it some space. 10, negative 10. Again, this is a 2D plane, so X and Y are now X and Y. Or X and Y, and negative would be that way. So when I play, I should see text in the corner. Yep, so there's my null. If I see null, I know something went wrong and my text didn't get updated. And then lastly, in the editor here, I'm going to click canvas, and I want to change the scale mode to screen size. I'll leave the reference resolution as is, because I want it to be bigger. Okay, so now we have everything we need on the Unity side of things. In the script, so we have our text. I'm going to create a, actually score should be private since it's not being used anywhere else. Public versus private, you know, something that's, if you go down the OOP route, you'd probably dig into a lot more. So I want a private void, I'm going to call it update score. I really don't like this update score. Now what we want is we want score text dot text equals in. We're going to say string in. Okay. This should work okay. Why don't you like this? Input. Okay, it didn't like in. In's a reserved word. All right, so I'm going to pass in a string to this function. All right, so when we start, I want to say update score, just zero it out, blank it out. So I'm going to pass in an empty string. So this private function is going to go ahead and just update it. I have a nice little reusable function call here. So just as a sanity check. Okay, hit play. That should have gone away. Did I forget something? I probably forgot something. I didn't apply the text. I thought I did this. So drag the text into here. Now we have a reference. Could have swore that I did that. Maybe I didn't. Check the tapes. All right, null went away. Life is good here. Now, last but not least, in our update, or sorry, in our trigger function, if it's a pickup, we're going to increment score, and we're going to update our function. So update text, or update score, the suspected spam call, score, space, plus score dot to string. Actually, in start, we should have it be score 0. You haven't picked anything up yet. Step anything yet. You silly goose. Epic. So we hit play. Oh, it's cutting off. Probably didn't make the canvas wide enough. Width, yeah, let's make this 1000 wide, see what happens. I've never dinked with a text field yet like that. Forgot. Okay, haven't picked anything up. Score 1, 2, 3. Score's updating. A little bit pixelated, we could fix that out later. All right, so now if score int, thank you. If score greater than equal to God Gamer 6. Update score. You won. So we're not going to do anything else. And what we can do is transform dot position dot y equals 100. Then thought I could do this directly. Transform dot position equals new vector 3. I could do this directly. Really? Hmm. Oh. I could have swore that I could have modified the separate positions directly. Maybe not. Okay. So we haven't picked anything up yet. Incredible. 1. Missed it. 2. Wow. 3, 4, 5, and 6. Oh no! Epic. Epical. Okay. So we have a game. We have an environment. We have a score system. And we have something silly happening to the player once they win. Again, one of the cool things about Unity or any of these other engines is this would have taken forever to code up by hand. But again, at the detriment of losing out on some of the optimization features that you would have with coding the memory directly, but saves you a lot of time, and there's a lot of things you can do with optimizing. So, I don't think there's anything else in the lab, so if you guys are okay with this, again, if this is too easy for you, feel free to expand on this and add things in. Like I said, I have basically been just combining little demos, and I turned it into this dungeon generation algorithm. Feel free to play around. Basically, all the tools are there for you, and you can just combine them until you get something fully fleshed out. Like here, if I wanted to take this and make it interesting, I could probably add like tilt controls and publish it to Android. And then I could put it up on the Play Store and have a bunch of people tell me how horrible my game is, and then one person say, hey, this is actually pretty fun, as play reviews tend to be. Anyway, does anybody have any questions at all? Anything on what we did today? So again, I expanded on a lot of things. I took my time. I talked through a lot of the points. This shouldn't take you nearly as long as it took me here. But what I will do is I will idle in the chat again. And yeah, good luck with the lab. On Tuesday, we will have another student presentation. I believe it is Dalton who is up, and he already sent me his video. So we'll talk about sprites a bit. I think my remaining plans to talk about things are at least going to be ragdolls and Unity 2D a little bit, in case you don't like the whole 3D paradigm. So I might actually target Tuesday to be Unity 2D to kind of dovetail nicely with what he's doing. So, other than that, good luck with the lab. Hope you all have a wonderful day. And I will be in the Discord channel otherwise. Have a good one.